I had movies I was subjected to because it was all my brother wanted to watch. So I've seen the movie Epic Movie dozens of times.
What is that?
It's the parody movie of, like, you know how there's, like, Not Another Teen Movie and stuff like that? Epic Movie is the one that's, like, it's a parody of 300 or whatever. I Am Spartacus. It's a parody of that. And it fucking sucks. It's just dick and balls and boobies. It's just shit. Epic Movie is maybe the worst movie of all time, and I have had to watch it at least 30 times in my life.
Oh my god, it has a 2% on Rotten Tomatoes. When you first said it, I was like, oh, it's that animated movie. Because there is an animated movie called Epic. But what I pictured in my head was Turbo.
Yeah.
And I was like, Dalton really, like, fucked with Turbo, the snail movie?
No, he really fucked with Epic Movie. References the Chronicles of Narnia, the Da Vinci Code, Harry Potter, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Pirates of the Caribbean, X-Men, and Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Which, like, here's the thing, at least for, like, Not Another Teen Movie, right? It's like, okay, cool, parody of teen movies. That's a genre.
Right. Seems like Scary Movie.
Yeah. Epic Movie, I think, just wanted to parody, like, it allegedly is parodying epics, but I don't know that I would call, I would call X-Men an epic. And, like, Nacho Libre, like, a whole joke in that is that it's parodying also Nacho Libre, and
I just saw Edward sneaks off to the white bitch's castle.
Yeah.
When he refuses to reveal to her where the others are, she flashes him her breasts, hypnotizing him into giving up the information on the orphans, then imprisons him.
Yeah.
I think that just caused psychic damage reading that.
Nobody send us an email at informedattraction@gmail.com asking us to talk more about Epic Movie, because it might give me an aneurysm.
Well, speaking of media that won't give you an aneurysm, hello and welcome to Informed Attraction, hosted by one hilarious rat and one groovy little freak from outer space, a podcast all about how sometimes a puppet gives you gender euphoria. I'm Mackenna Goodrich.
I'm Dr. Aubrey Hoffer.
And today we are launching into a 3-part series about the Muppets. I'm a big Muppet head. Aubrey apparently hates Joy and Delight.
I don't hate Muppets. You know what? We're just gonna get it out of the way right now, guys. I'm not really a Muppet connoisseur. Like, I vaguely know of the Muppets. I have much love in my heart for Jim Henson, who I think was a brilliant artistic mind, and I have a ton of love in my heart for Sesame Street, especially as a developmental psychologist. So if we start talking about Sesame Street, then you're really gonna get those are my Blorbos, okay? My Blorbos live on Sesame Street.
There's a season of Dimension 20 where one of the girls is canonically the daughter of the Count from Sesame Street.
That's great.
I was like, I feel like the only thing we could, like, legally talk about when it comes to, like, attraction in the Sesame Street universe, because they are otherwise children.
They are children. They're, like, Sesame Street is amazing children's media. I love it very much. Big Bird makes me cry. Elmo makes me cry. Oscar the Grouch makes me cry. Like, I love them.
Well, the Muppets also make me cry, so we're gonna talk about an episode of children's TV that made me cry as an adult today.
I like the Baby Muppets. I think there was a Baby Muppets TV show that I liked, but yeah, I think most people, right, you probably grew up watching the Muppets, right? Like, your parents probably liked it. How did you find the Muppets?
Being a little freak who likes puppets.
I guess. I also feel like,
am I a man? Or am I a Muppet? Aubrey, do you think you're a man, a Muppet of a man, or a very manly Muppet?
Muppet of a man.
I agree, and I think I'm a very manly Muppet. I might just be a Muppet.
I also feel, I don't even want to get into this, because this gets into, like, levels of haterdom that are probably incomprehensible to the average person, but, like,
lock in, Aubrey.
I don't know. I feel like the kind of people who are like, oh my god, like, I love opossums, are the kind of people who are like, oh my god, I love the Muppets. And unless you're, like, a couple layers deep, you might not even really get what I'm saying. But, like, I'm not saying that people who like Muppets are, like, pick-me's, but I'm saying that, like, people who, like, people who do have good taste, but also think they have good taste, really like the Muppets, and I like having good taste, but not thinking I have good taste, and knowing I have good taste. You know what I mean? I gotta be a couple layers deep.
Aubrey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think it's pick-me behavior to like opossums?
A little bit. A little bit.
I think they're so cool.
I'm just saying.
But I just love little street animals. Like, I love a street animal. I love an opossum. I love a raccoon.
Josh loves a raccoon. They are his...
Because they're hilarious. They're just little street animals. Like, why are they like, they're freaking hands? Why do they do that?
One of the best internet videos of all time of an animal is the raccoon who is given cotton candy. Because if you don't know, raccoons dip their food in water and then they eat it. And so when you give a raccoon cotton candy, it dips it in the water and it dissolves before their eyes. And you see the 7 stages of grief.
Have you seen the guy who throws hot dogs to the raccoons on his back porch?
No. Can raccoons eat hot dogs?
I don't know, but there's a guy who has so many videos on his... I'm gonna cry thinking about this because I'm so sleep deprived. He just has so many videos on his YouTube channel where he just throws hot dogs to the raccoons in his backyard because he's like in the woods.
Okay, it's 10 to 7. And I got a bucket of grapes. I'm going to throw that whole bucket out because I can't get out the door to do the hot dogs. So, this is going to be fun now. Right, here. Here. Come on, watch your toes. Watch your toes.
Are raccoons carnivorous?
Yeah, I think they're omnivorous. I think they're just sort of... Yeah.
I mean, I guess they just eat whatever. It feels
yeah,
wrong.
They're omnivores.
Like, it's like, I know a bird could eat a chicken nugget, but I feel like that's like a fucked up thing to give a bird.
You know a bird could eat a chicken nugget? You went with bird for chicken nugget?
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is that a bird could eat a chicken... Like, you could feed birds chicken nuggets, but I think it might be kind of fucked up to do that. Just like how a raccoon can eat a hot dog, but I don't know. I just feel like it's a little close.
Aubrey, do you think that hot dogs are made of raccoon?
I think some hot dogs are made of raccoon ankles.
Okay, I just laughed so hard that I saw black for a second. So, we have to log back into the episode. I've centered each of these episodes around a core question, and today's core question is, why do so many non-binary and queer people identify with Gonzo? However, I've said a lot of terms that if you're not familiar with Jim Henson and his oeuvre, you're probably like, Mackenna, Aubrey, what the fuck are you guys talking about? So, let's get into some context! So first of all, what the fuck is the Muppets? We're gonna do a series about how attraction works more generally in the Muppet-verse later on, but we're starting with this episode because I wanted to start specific and then get broad and whatever. But I do feel like we have to intro what the Muppets are before we get into the meat of this episode. So, the Muppets are an American ensemble cast of puppet characters created by Jim Henson. Think of a puppet. Everyone close your eyes and picture a puppet in your head right now. You probably just picture something that Jim Henson has created.
Oh, I pictured, like, in my hand, if you put, like, just, like, a regular little, like, napkin on my hand, and I was just going, that's what that was what I pictured as a puppet, because I have the power of imagination, and I don't let IPs rot my brain. So, my rendition of a puppet was that, not like you. Fucking idiot out there, you probably imagined Kermit or something, you stupid piece of shit. Or fucking Pop and Smash, or what's the fucking famous...
Pop and Smash?
No, what's Pop and Lock and Drop? No, like, what's the famous puppet? It's like the English one where it, like, hits with the hammer. You said you do puppets!
Oh my god, what are those puppets called? The puppet that beats its wife. Punch and Judy.
What'd I say, Pop and Smash? That wasn't...
You said Pop and Lock and Jam and Break as if we were in a High School Musical.
Yeah. I'd like to pop and lock.
Jam and break.
Is that the one
I cannot wait for a community theater in Louisville, Kentucky to do a High School Musical so you can play that character.
Because I'm fat?
Yeah.
Point taken.
The Muppets originated in the short-form television series Sam and Friends, which was a lead-in to The Tonight Show that aired on WRC-TV. Then the Muppets started appearing on Sesame Street before getting their own show, The Muppet Show, which ran from 1976 to 1981. Since then, they've also been in so many movies, other TV shows, etc., and are just a huge staple of American media, especially. I would be genuinely shocked to find out that anyone in our audience from an English-speaking country had not heard of the Muppets, at least. But to the 1.33% of our audience who is from Vietnam, I ask, have you heard of the Muppets? Email us at informedattraction@gmail.com. For today, on to Gonzo. Who is Gonzo? Aubrey, what do you know about Gonzo?
He's the blue one, with big nose, and he wears, like, Hawaiian shirts and shit. He's like, wants to be a comedian, right? That's, like, his little thing.
He's like a stunt man.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah,
Not like, he's not like Jerry Seinfeld.
It's like, what, like Gonzo the Great or something?
Mhm.
Okay. Which one must be, is Fozzie who's a stand-up comedian?
Correct.
Okay. Well, look, I'm working with a rudimentary knowledge of the Muppets' occupations.
I mean, you knew.
What is Kermit, like a chiropractor?
Why would he be a chiropractor?
Why is Gonzo a stuntman? Why can't
he's-
Kermit be a chiropractor?
Because Kermit would be a real doctor.
Well, maybe.
Gonzo is my favorite Muppet because I am non-binary, so he's obviously my favorite Muppet. My friend Jessie Joe once sent me the clip of Gonzo looking dead into the camera and saying, "Guilt," and when this is the part of media that I think most exemplifies you, Aubrey, I'm sending
I've seen
the
it.
shit to you.
I've seen it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, well then I'll just put it in the episode so other people can know about it since Aubrey doesn't want to watch the thing
No,
I was gonna send her, so I guess I'll just delete myself.
No, because I've literally referenced this to you, but I thought he was saying something else, and you were like, "No, he's saying guilt."
Guilt. Yeah. Have you seen the whole context of it?
No.
Okay. Well,
Now you're doing Muppet arms.
I just Muppet flailed so hard I knocked my headphones off. Okay, well I'm sending you the clip with the whole context.
Wow, some sophisticated piece of equipment. What do you call this,
My
Scooter?
uncle bought it. It's a TR-600, but be very careful.
Yeah.
You can't touch it.
I can't touch
It's a
it?
delicate piece of machinery.
Wow.
Oh, okay, I'll be very careful. I'll just stand over here.
That's me.
Oh, no,
God,
don't
don't
sneeze.
don't
That's
sneeze.
very delicate. Don't grab it. No, don't sneeze. Oh, no, what you've done.
Guilt.
Yeah. The thing that I love about it, like, the Jim Henson comedy is so 60s, and 60s comedy was so absurd, and we've really kind of gone full circle where comedy of the 2020s is pretty absurd, which just makes media from the 60s incredibly funny to us now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sincerely, one of the weird things about being non-binary is that there aren't actually many characters who I feel like explored the sensation of being non-binary and this, like, in-between othered feeling. And to be clear, we are starting to get more and more non-binary characters in media, but that definitely was not true when Aubrey and I were growing up. Aubrey, when do you feel like you first heard about the concept of being non-binary?
I was probably in college. I don't think when I was in high school. I think when I was in high school, I definitely knew about the concept of being trans and maybe the idea of like a third gender type thing, but it was probably talked about more in terms of, you know, oh, some cultural traditions have this idea, but I probably didn't meet somebody who really identified as non-binary until I was like in my 20s.
I feel very similarly. There was one person I knew in college who used they, them pronouns, and I was still just sort of unclear on what exactly that meant. And then I didn't really experience the wave of people coming out as non-binary until like the last, I would say 4-ish years. I would argue that while there are more non-binary characters now, there aren't a ton of like fleshed out characters where the entire emotional core of their character feels like it has reflected my experience. And thus, Gonzo, I think, is important to a lot of queer people because his central question is one that a lot of queer people spend years asking. What am I exactly? We're also basically going to today talk about a queer reading of a character that isn't explicitly queer. So I do want to talk a little bit about queer readings because it can be controversial. People are like, why are you imposing gay stuff on shit that isn't gay? And this is a quote from researcher Alexander Doty. He said, queer readings aren't alternative readings, wistful or willful misreadings, or reading too much into things readings. They result from the recognition and articulation of the complex range of queerness that has been in popular culture texts and their audiences all along. And I think this is also specifically relevant because so little queer media exists still, but especially at the time we're talking about with like the big influx of Muppet media, so like the Muppet Show era and then when all the movies were coming out. And Aubrey, I would love for you to read this, the way that this writer, Sarah E. S. Sinwell, talks about the concept of queering media / being queer.
Queer is not just a way of being, not just the text itself, but it is also the way of doing and undoing, of framing and seeing.
I also really like Anna Marie Jagos's definition, Aubrey.
Queer is always an identity under construction, a state of permanent becoming. I really like that. That really resonates with how I kind of feel about queerness and my relationship with queerness. The thing that I'll say, like, this is very much an episode oriented on, like, the non-binary identity specifically. I think for me, the way I think of my gender identity is, like, I don't know. That shit's all fake to me. But I don't know. I always see the experiences of non-binary people, and sometimes I'm like, damn, me too, dude. But I don't really feel a connection to, like, the non-binary identity. So I think one thing I'm curious too about hearing from you is, like, what made, like when you kind of found the, like, concept of a non-binary gender identity, what was it that made that really mesh for you and really feel like, you know, this is the thing that fits?
Yeah, a couple things. I think that, like, this episode definitely came from a place of, like, so many little non-binary people love Gonzo, but I also, like, this to me is more generally about, like, why queer people connect to Gonzo. I just think the gender stuff is more poignant than, like, sexuality stuff with his presentation and stuff like that.
Well, but I've also seen memes of people, like, I remember back on ye old Tumblr days of people being like, every bisexual dresses like Gonzo.
Yeah, because every bisexual does dress like Gonzo, and now every non-binary dresses like Gonzo.
Well, and that's what I find interesting, right? Is that there is this, like, archetype, and I feel like it did kind of go from, like, if you're bisexual, you're like this, to, like, if you're non-binary, you're like this, and it's an interesting thing for me to parse apart, where when it's about bisexuality, I'm like, cool, that, like, really resonates with me, but then, like, it doesn't for the other thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I think that when most of our language was centered around sexuality as opposed to gender, which I feel like it really was when we were young, especially, like, on ye old days of Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also think that a lot of those memes of, like, every bisexual dresses like Gonzo, I think a lot of those people who were identifying with that way of dress maybe now are rocking some she, they, he pronouns. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's, like, the point I'm trying to make, right? Is that it's like the writing was on the wall, and I don't know, it just makes me really kind of curious about, like, as different, like, ideas around gender, ideas around sexuality, like, when we start to have language for those constructs, like, more people begin to, like, feel identity and community within that language, right? And totally. I don't know, it's so fascinating, like, when I think about, like, the study of gender and gender, like, development, because, like, working in a lab where we were doing stuff about gender, I was like, holy shit, you guys are not, like, with it. And even, like, 5 or 6 years ago, it's like, you know, since then, I'm like, oh my god, it's like, not that it's impossible to do research on, like, non-binary gender identity, but, like, it's really challenging to research something that is so, like, the modern language around it is still being developed, right? Like, it's not solidified. Like, I feel like right now, we do have, like, a cultural script for, like, being a gay man. Like, there's enough knowledge about kind of, like, male, like, gay culture where people can study male gay culture, and we have kind of an understanding of, like, what does that look like, what does that mean, what is the average experience for, like, a gay man in the United States, and not that that's a monolith of all, like, gay male experiences or whatever, but on the, you know, then on, like, the flip side of that, if somebody's like, oh, I want to study the non-binary experience, like, you can't even start.
Right, totally. And I think that, like, the thing that I would say is, so I tend to just generally define both my sexuality and my gender as queer. I use lots of different language to talk about my gender specifically because I feel just generally non-specific about it. But I'll say sort of like a Mackenna gender journey in brief is when I graduated college and I moved to New York, I was spending a lot of time with my friends who are, like, capital W women who, like, we're going out and we were, like, being hot girls in New York, And I just started to feel, for the first time in my whole life, I'd experienced like body dysmorphia before, but this was the first time where I was like, this is not that, this is like gender dysphoria. And I was like, something is like wrong. And I was like, didn't know what it was. And then I started like meeting more and more non-binary people. And I was like, what happens if I just add a they to these pronouns and I just say she, they? And I immediately felt this like sense of like peace and calm that then like honestly knocked out a lot of that like angst I was having about like presenting as hyperfemme, because it just took it away. Frankly, it took the gender presentation out of it for me.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm presenting this thing that I'm not, and now it just feels like I am just being. And so like, I think that for me, I end up in sort of, I think we actually end up in very similar camps, so we have different like inroads to it, where I just kind of feel like kind of a gender nihilist,
Yeah.
or like a gender abolitionist, or like a gender anarchist, where I'm just sort of like, I don't care, and I feel different ways on different days, to the point that just like detaching presentation from any sort of gender label made me feel less like I was trying to be something that I'm not.
Yeah.
I also was talking to a person who's a couple years younger than me who just came out as non-binary literally yesterday, because it was Pride yesterday. And they were talking about that they have a twin brother, and they were like, so much of how I learned to be a person was through my twin brother, that I never really identified with being a woman, because the person I am the closest to in every way in my life is a man.
Yeah.
And I think that like for me too, like sort of like growing up with my brothers, especially my younger brother, who like we did a lot of like dress up and shit like that, where like gender was just very fluid when me and my younger brother were kids. I feel kind of similar to that, where it's like the way that I learned to be a person was largely through a lens of like an interest in masculinity that was trying to be shunted by the traditional structures of society around me.
I think it's interesting because I feel like my upbringing is similar, and I had a different, I think, experience with gender, where, you know, growing up, I was always very much like a tomboy. Like, because of the family dynamics that I had at play, I really had to position myself as like one of the guys with my dad and brother. And it's like, as I got older, I really started to ask what does like being a woman mean to me, and like how does that make me feel? And you know, I think for me, parsing through all of the like misogyny around that question, ultimately like where I kind of feel the best in my gender and the most like empowered in my gender is like, you know, I just decided I'm a woman, and whatever I am is a woman, and if it is something that doesn't align with what other people's views of what a woman are, then that's on them. And like, I don't know. I think the point I'm trying to make is that like, even like, I don't know. I just feel like there is so much synergy in the experiences that we're describing, despite the different endpoints. And I think that that just speaks to how, like, a journey of gender and, like, a journey of sexuality, like, I don't know. There are certain things about queerness that I think is universal, because I am still, like, a queer person in my sexuality, and I think in the way that I live, and I think even though I use she, her pronouns kind of in the way that I do gender too, but I also think that's just like in the, what's it all mean? What is it? What are we trying to do here, guys?
If I may tap the tattoo, everything's made up and the points don't matter. And it's all just kind of think about gender like a soup. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We can call soups lots of things.
Yeah.
But like whatever you want to call that soup, it's fine. It's whatever you get from the soup.
Yeah.
Gender soup. I'd also like to say that Gonzo is certainly queer in the like old-timey sense of the word, as in strange, odd, peculiar. So I don't think it's crazy that then people jump with him to our more modern definition of queerness.
He's zesty.
Oh yeah, baby. Zesty's a great word for it. I saw the Strange and Bad Rob Lake Muppet Magic show that was on Broadway last year, and my comment is too much weird magic, not enough Muppet, but I genuinely felt starstruck upon seeing Gonzo and Miss Piggy, but more on her next time. Sorry for derailing us, though. Gonzo is a Muppet. He is especially known for his passion for wild stunts. The dude loves to be shot out of a cannon. His other big trait is ambiguity of his species, which is like the main reason I think non-binary people resonate with him so deeply. Whatever Gonzo is like the central joke of his character. So the prototype of Gonzo appeared in The Great Santa Claus Switch as a generic gruff baddie as the Cigar Bucks Frackle. And he's basically a Frackle that emerges from a cigar box, and I love him so much. He's so cute. Aubrey, look at him.
Where'd I put my cigar box? Oh, there it is. Hey, give me a cigar, will you?
Here it is, boss.
Thank you.
He's
You
a
do good work,
baby.
fella.
Ah, you come.
We watched him be
Nice to
born.
meet you.
Are you really Santa Claus?
I mean, it makes sense, right? Because I feel like so many queer people, like, we like to see ourselves as, like, little creatures in the dark that, everybody, like, the average person would be like, ew, that's a gross rat. But then other little freaks are like, oh, look at how cute it is. Like, we all just want to be, like, scrungly.
Yes. And if you wonder what a Frackle is, Frackles are, like, basically, they're the henchmen of Cosmo's scam. And so they're like the little like henchmen Muppets. And so that's what Gonzo originally was. He was originally a Frackle named Snarl. And he was also canonically created as a character with low self-esteem, which is another reason I think I relate to him. This is an interview with Dave Goelz, who he voices a lot of the Muppets, including Gonzo and Waldorf, one of the two grumpy old men. I think he also does the Swedish Chef. And this is his quote about, like, creating the character of Gonzo.
The Muppets are a big psychodrama where you feed your personality and fears through your characters. I usually search for a flaw of mine I can use for comedy, and then I try to find a way to make it lovable. For example, the clumsy traveling Matt character in Fraggle Rock came out of wanting to preserve my dignity and not be shamed in front of people. It was the same with Gonzo. When he appeared in the 1970s, he was really pathetic, and he didn't have much confidence, and that came from me. I had suddenly found myself in show business, and I thought, how did I get here from the sofa? I have no idea how to do this. So I asked Jim Henson if I could build a new Gonzo with an eye mechanism that could allow him to look excited. This was his second phase, with his zany, bombastic appreciation for life.
And you'll often hear people talk about that, like, the early Gonzo model was sort of a problem, because then when he was doing all of these crazy stunts, it just seemed kind of sad and painful. And so all the stunts just kind of came across as, like, not abusive, but just like, oh, he's getting his shit rocked. And so then giving him these eyes that can make him look excited, let it be fun instead of just a bummer. And I think this quote is really interesting because I feel like, for me, like, Gonzo is so cool and confident and so in his, like, persona. But also reflecting on this quote, I feel now that, like, thinking about his character, there's so much anxiety with his character. And I'm like, oh, yeah, another thing that I identify with. But I do think it's telling that this was sort of the genesis, and they've spent a lot of time having Gonzo, like, come out of his shell and be having a straight up good time now. So I think a lot of people probably know Gonzo as having the Charles Dickens role in the Muppet Christmas Carol movie. This is from the director of that movie, Brian Henson, who is Jim Henson's son. Aubrey, congrats, you've been cast as Brian Henson.
Great. Nobody had ever captured Dickens' prose, the wonderful way he described the scenes, so he had to put Charles Dickens in the movie. Who's the least likely character to be Charles Dickens? Gonzo. So he made him this omniscient storyteller, with Rizzo his pain-in-the-neck sidekick. 95% of what Gonzo says in the movie is directly taken from the book.
Gonzo and Rizzo remain a duo in Muppet Treasure Island, which came out in 1996.
That one I remember. I liked that one.
It's great. And Muppets from Space in 1999. And may I assert, boldly and certainly, that me and Aubrey are Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat. Aubrey, I'm sending you a video for you to watch.
Right?
Tuppence apiece while they last.
They won't last long the way you're eating them. I am here to tell the story.
And I am here for the food.
My name is Charles Dickens.
And my name is Rizzo the Rat. Hey, wait a second. You're not Charles Dickens.
I am too.
No, a blue furry Charles Dickens who hangs out with a rat.
The lamplighters were plying their trade.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
Yeah, we're just a little duo.
Do not light the rat on fire. So from Wikipedia, Gonzo is not a puppet version of a human or a recognizable animal. He has an unusual appearance, which includes purple-blue fur, purple feathers on his head, bug eyes, and a long hooked nose, often referred to as a beak. And now, a quick message from Gonzo himself.
Hey guys. You want me to record a song? Okay, let me just get my nose out of the way here. Okay. When I was in the 3rd grade, I thought that I was gay because I could draw Bert and Ernie were, and I kept my room straight. I told Kermit, tears rushing down my face. He's like, Gonzo, you loved hens since before pre-K. Trippin'? Yeah, I guess he had a point, didn't he? A bunch of stereotypes all in my head. I remember doing the math like, yeah, I'm good at Little League, a preconceived idea of what it all meant. For those that like the same sex had the characteristics, the right-wing conservatives think it's a decision. You can be cured with some treatment and religion. Man-made rewiring of a predisposition playing God. Nah, here we go. America the brave still fears what we don't know. And God loves all his children is somehow forgotten, but we paraphrase a book written 3,500 years ago? I don't know. Yeah, so I guess at the end of the day, just be your weird self. I mean, what else are you gonna be?
Gonzo's self-identity is whatever, much like many non-binary people's gender. In the film The Great Muppet Caper, Gonzo is shipped to England in a crate labeled whatever, while Kermit the Frog and Fozzie Bear are respectively labeled Frog and Bear. In the same movie, he refers to himself as a Gonzo. He's definitely not a bird, because when he tells a Christmas turkey that he's dating Camilla, the turkey is like, "You're not even a bird, bitch." He doesn't say bitch, but in my dreams, he does. And in The Muppets Wizard of Oz, which I did not know existed, but now must consume, Gonzo played a Tin Man-like character, primarily known as the Tin Thing. I feel like the whatever crate is probably the most iconic joke in this regard, Aubrey. If you haven't seen it, I'm just sending you that image on text.
Yes.
In his gender prison. But I rattle off all these examples to say that this was like an extremely long-running joke of the show and the subsequent movies. And like to be clear, it is funny. It's a really funny joke. But I think they made a really clear choice in the movie Muppets from Space, where they're like, what if the joke you've been hearing your whole life suddenly stopped being funny? Because while I think that there is sometimes this like ethereal beauty associated with androgyny, think of like Jamie Campbell Bower, Hunter Schafer, Michaela Cole, Emma Darcy, I also think the experience for most queer folks, especially young people, being not categorizable often leads to bullying and isolation. And like, for example, when I was working at a kids theater last summer, there was like this flock of little gay people who gravitated towards me because I probably was one of the few like cool, strange, non-binary people they had met. Maybe not, I don't know their experience before meeting me, but like, it was very clear that I was like, oh, the few of you who are following me around are little gay people. And so I do want to spend a fair amount of time talking about Muppets from Space, which I mentioned came out in 1999. Aubrey, have you ever seen Muppets from Space?
No.
Okay, cool. So Muppets from Space is a really interesting movie because it's not really based on anything else, which like I feel like a lot of the Muppet movies they were doing at that time were. Muppets from Space is a movie where Gonzo is sort of the central character. And it's largely about this feeling of isolation and loneliness that Gonzo feels being the only one of his kind. So the opening scene of the movie is Gonzo is having nightmares about being denied entry from Noah's Ark. And I am curious about how Gonzo ended up with religious trauma. Who did this to him? Which Muppet instilled religious trauma in Gonzo? And honestly, it's just kind of like a shockingly scary way for a Muppet movie to begin, because it's just like Gonzo being told like being basically like banished to certain death because he's not allowed to go on Noah's Ark.
Damn. So Muppets did take a hard stance on the truth of the Bible.
Yeah. And so Rizzo and Gonzo sleep in the same room, and I think that's super duper cute, the roommates. Rizzo says he's there for Gonzo, who's freaking out about this nightmare, but as Gonzo starts to be a sad boy, Rizzo just falls asleep.
Me and you! Me and you!
The next morning, they're like all doing shenanigans in their big Muppet house they live in together. And then there's a joke where Gonzo comes down later than everyone else and like looks depressed as hell, and Kermit's like, Gonzo, are you still performing at that bar mitzvah today? And he's like, nah, the Electric Mayhem are covering for me. And then Dr. Teeth and the rest of the Electric Mayhem walk by and go, shalom. And I like that. Gonzo begins to realize just how alone he is. Gonzo tells Kermit that he is getting tired of being referred to as a whatever and seemingly longs to find out more about his origin. And Kermit calls Gonzo distinct, which, oh boy, know that pain of being like, you're just different from everybody else. And it's like, that's not a compliment. That makes me feel crazy. And then Gonzo looks at all of their family photos that are up on the wall, and like everyone has one with another one of their species. And there's just one of him alone on a beach looking like mournfully out to sea. The major villain in this movie is played by Jeffrey Tambor, and I did just write Jeffrey Tambor jump scare.
Yeah. Just as in real life, he is a villain.
Yes, exactly. So shenanigans obviously ensue because it is the Muppets, but at the end of the day, an alien ship arrives, and the aliens, who all resemble Gonzo, explain that many years ago they lost him and now welcome him back and want him to come home with them. And there's this like big party, and it has to be said that the other Gonzos all sing Celebration by Kool and the Gang and are in these like little like Earth, Wind, and Fire Elton John outfits and are just like serving a bunch of cunt and camp and like just being a bunch of gay little Gonzos. And Gonzo himself has on the best little outfit in this scene. He's got on a little like printed shirt and a little printed vest, and then he has a tie that has his wife on it. He has a tie that has Camilla on it. But then the other Gonzos still call him one of a kind. And so he's still kind of canonically sort of in between both worlds, because he's not really one of them, but also he is. And like, as someone who has often referred to themselves as a Kirkland brand woman, or a woman but sort of bad at it, I really felt that. And I just have to say that like, also,
why would Kirkland brand is the best brand?
I know, but like,
that's not even
brand.
I mean, I'm saying it's not a good example. I mean, you say you're Great Value. Well, no, there's some Great Value that slaps.
Because it's not about quality. It's just about not being like the brand name of the thing. It's being the like. It's not being the label version of the thing. It's being the thing that's like slightly adjacent to the label of the thing. You know what I mean?
See, Kirkland version is like better though. To me, Kirkland brand woman implies you're better than a regular woman, and maybe.
Okay. Hey, and maybe.
All right, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked ourselves back into it.
I can be bad at being a woman and thus be better. You know what I mean?
So bad at being a woman, you just became better than other women?
Yes. Obviously, I'm better than other people.
Huge if true.
I also just have to say, just like watching this whole sequence, like when the alien ship comes down and stuff, and all of these like many Gonzo puppets are like dancing and singing Celebration. It's just like such a testament to how cool practical sets and puppets and costumes are. Let me see if I can find this just to show you this sequence. You don't have to watch all of it, but I want to see just like how massive of a experience this whole thing is.
A celebration. That's my family. That's my family. Shall bring you good time.
Isn't it crazy how movies look so good when they're not just all CGI?
Exactly.
Yeah, let's all celebrate.
Yeah, it looks so good.
We're gonna celebrate and have a good time.
Does he change outfits, or is the outfit you like him with all these patterns on?
The one with all the patterns on it.
It is. It's a non-binary / bisexual outfit. That in and of itself is an interesting conversation topic of how in the 2010s, like, queer people often defined based on sexuality and now more on gender. But then I do think it does open up, I don't know, kind of weirdness with not always feeling, I don't know. I never feel like I'm queer enough to actually be queer, so.
Well, did you see all the other little Gonzo outfits?
I did. They were very cute.
They're very good. Yeah, that gets into a whole other conversation about, like, the fact that, like, non-binaries become a whole other third identity, which also feels like there's weird gender barriers up around, and it's, like, that's why I tend to lean, like, gender abolition, gender anarchy, as opposed to, like, this, like, third gender thing, because I just think it then creates a different beauty standard that we don't need to be engaging with.
Yep.
So then, they're all like, not Shining Star, they're all, celebrate good times, come on. And then Jeffrey Tambor shows up and is like, I'm gonna kill you, Gonzo. Not I'm gonna kill you. He's like, I'm taking you back to prison, Gonzo. And then all the Gonzos laugh at him because he forgot to load the gun. And so all the Gonzos are like, ha, fuck you, Jeffrey Tambor. But then also there's like this, because there's something like kind of awesome about like the tables turning and all the little weird aliens laughing at the white man. But then you find out that they just value comic instincts and performance. Gay. They're all gay. And the Muppets invite him to be the ambassador to their planet because they find him so silly. And then Jeffrey Tambor says, I will travel the stars like a modern day Magellan. And I fear this man is going to colonize space.
Yeah.
At first...
For the bit.
What?
For the bit.
For the bit. At first, Gonzo considers going with the other Gonzos. He says goodbye to Rizzo, and Rizzo's like, I don't do goodbyes. I can find another roommate, it's okay. But then he's obviously very upset about it. But then Gonzo ultimately decides to stay with the Muppets instead because he doesn't need to go home. He already is home.
Me when you choose to come to Louisville, Kentucky instead of hanging out with all of the queer people in New York.
And so I think there's just like a lot of stuff going on in this movie, finding your identity, feeling different from everyone else, chosen family, which is all very queer gender identity stuff. And so I do want to talk about for a second this idea of chosen family. So let me first define that. A chosen family is a group of individuals who deliberately choose one another to play significant roles in each other's lives. One way of understanding a chosen family is as a group of people to whom a person is emotionally close enough to consider them as family, even though they are not biologically or legally related. Within chosen families, the notion of family involves a responsibility to guarantee and commitment, as well as a willingness to provide comfort in times of trouble. So it's not ultimately surprising that a lot of queer narratives lock into this narrative structure of being about a protagonist finding their people. I think a lot of queer stories have like kind of this structure. I am different and I don't know why. I feel alone. Thus, I seek out and find others like me, and by the end, I have this sort of chosen family structure and understand more about myself. And I think this notion is basically what's going on in Muppets from Space, except for it's interesting because there's almost an inversion here that I think we actually see more commonly in narratives about like adopted people, long lost family situations, etc. So it's not shocking that it's present in this particular context. So in Muppets from Space, Gonzo actually finds his biological people, but then chooses his chosen family anyway, but not because his biological aliens or bad people or whatever. They're not. But at this point in his life, they're not his people, and it would be too great of a loss to give up his chosen family to go far, far away with these people who he is descended from and looks like, but doesn't actually know. And so the ending sort of rejects the idea that identity alone creates belonging. The aliens explain what he is, but the Muppets are the ones who love him, and those are different things. Mm-hmm. And that isn't like, I feel like me saying that kind of sounds like I'm saying like, don't invest in your culture and finding out more about yourself and your background if you were like raised in a culture that is not your own. But I just think that there's like a thing that like, it's not only about like your strict identity, especially in a gender context. We're speaking more gender here than like ethnicity, but like it is more about finding your people. Also, in one of the papers I read, they basically were like Muppets from Space was bad for Gonzo's character because it made him seek belonging when up until that point he had been okay with who he is. And it's like, brother, if you don't think a lot of queer people are constantly having crises about their identities and wanting to feel different and like they belong, or why can't they just be like other people? You are wrong. It is not a linear path to like, I was sad about being gay, trans, non-binary, whatever, but now I feel awesome about it and nothing different. Like the journey winds, it ebbs and flows. I think there are other early indicators of Gonzo's queerness. So for example, there's a thing in the Muppet Show where Kermit does not have anyone to dance with at a dance marathon. And so Gonzo offers to himself as a partner to Kermit and says, I'll lead. And he takes Kermit in his arms and tells him, you look lovely tonight. And Gonzo performs the cliched lines of a leading man, seemingly unaware that there's anything wrong or absurd about his choice of another man as a partner. And, like, there's a laugh track, and so they're sort of, like, laughing at, like, ha, 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 this is gay. We could get into this a little bit, and I'm sure we will in, like, future episodes. There is some, like, homophobic and racist shit in the Muppet Show, and this is sort of an example of that, where it's played for laughs of, like, Gonzo and Kermit dancing with each other, and Gonzo not getting that it's weird that, like, he's dancing with another man. But I do think that, like, throughout time, Gonzo has definitely been used as that character that's like, let's just do some gay shit, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
So I think kind of the point there is that, like, the Muppet Theater is a place where gender roles are kind of always provisionally destabilized. And so there's always kind of space for queer play of varying degrees to, like, very silly to very serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a really good example of that is the Gonzarella episode of the Muppet Babies. So this was back in 2021, when we were still in Woke 1, before we weren't allowed to be woke anymore, and now we're entering Woke 2. In the episode, the Muppets plan to dress up for a formal dance party. Gonzo is disappointed to learn that only girls can dress up as princesses, while boys have to be knights. Until Rizzo the fairy rat father gifts Gonzo with a gown and slippers. Gonzo attends the ball anonymously, wearing a mask, for fear of how he'll be perceived by the other Muppets. Afterwards, the Muppets tell him he missed a great party, at which point he reveals, everyone, there's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella. And then everyone's like, what the fuck, Gonzo? Why didn't you tell us that was you? And he's like, you all expected me to look a certain way. I don't want you to be upset with me, but I don't want to do things just because that's the way they've always been done either. I want to be me. And I think what's really beautiful is what the response from the other Muppets is they're like, yay, Gonzo! And then they're like, fuck the royal handbook. We don't have to do boys are knights and girls are princesses anymore. And so they all are like, yeah, this shit is all made up. Get rid of it. And to me, this means that Gonzo is canonically a they, he. But also, fashion is gender neutral, and Gonzo could just, like, be doing drag in this scene. I ultimately think this episode is more about the idea of, like, gender norms and gender conformity than, like, assigning a certain gender to Gonzo. Judith Butler has often emphasized that there is no gender without or before its performance. I also think it's worth here talking about that some other people have read The Great Gonzo, which is his, like, performance persona, as a drag personality or a somehow otherwise extreme persona that is separate from Gonzo himself. Aubrey, this is from an article I read.
The Great Gonzo is an extreme personality, and he revels in being different, other, unique. His character truly came together for his puppeteer Dave Goelz when, after a failed audition for Dancing Chickens, he had Gonzo turn to the camera and ad-lib, "Nice legs, though." It says a lot about the character that his sexual preference for poultry is merely an odd, rather charming detail.
Yeah. And so I think that then in the context of this, like, Muppet Babies show, like, the idea that Gonzo is presented with a rule that doesn't make sense for how he feels about himself and is like, I don't want to be a knight, I want to be a princess, and but I don't want to break the rule.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I say that as someone who, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like, I frequently played dress up with my younger brother, and he was, like, serving in a dress at age 7. But then at a certain point, you learn that, like, you're not supposed to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of, like, gender development is, like, kids learn very early in, like, childhood about what are expectations for men and women and boys and girls, and a lot of that is what they should look like. And most children are, like, quite strict on gender policing for themselves and others because, like, it's part of that, like, gender development and making sense of the world, right? Like, if you're told, oh, like, you know, I mean, it goes down to even, like, how you think about language, right? Like, if you're told a cow is this thing that is white and has black spots and and hooves, then you go, that's a cow. If you're told, oh, like, what is the difference between a man and a woman? Oh, well, you know, women wear dresses and men wear pants. It's like, yeah, like you develop a, like, you know, like this schema of this is what women are like and this is what men are like, and you don't, you know, it fucks with the definition too much to blend that, especially when you're like 6.
Yeah, and I think that like that is in some of the reading I was doing. So this is from a paper called "The Mouse That Roared: Disney and the End of Innocence." These two researchers argue that children's films are the primary way in which youth learn about themselves, their relationships to others, and the larger world. I think I cut this from a previous episode because it was in our intro section, but me and Aubrey were talking about a few weeks ago, like, why it sucks there's not a lot of, like, media for tweens right now, because it's like, yeah, kids really do, like, kind of, like, learn about themselves in the world through depictions of people their age. But also depictions of people not their age, and like kids' films, like the things that you watch as a child are going to be really informative in that. And so I think specifically thinking about like a Disney lens, it means that most of the socialization that kids are receiving is largely a heteronormative one, and a lot of Disney movies serve as a way of reinforcing traditional gender roles. Think about all of your princess movies. Queer representation is often considered taboo in children's media. And there's a researcher named Susan Driver who wrote this book about queer girls and popular culture. And what she talks about in that book is that, like, basically deviation from female gender roles is often viewed as just a brief deviation from heteronormativity that they will still return to. Aubrey, I was thinking about that a lot when you were talking about, like, sort of, like, boyifying yourself when you were young in order to relate to your dad and brother, and then kind of having to swing back the other way. And I think that, like, you were doing that more, not as I wouldn't say it's a survival strategy, but just more as, like, a...
No, it was a survival strategy.
Okay. Well, it's like, but I think that, like, I think a lot of times when, like, girls have these, like, tomboy moments growing up, it's often viewed as, like, yeah, but then you'll want to, like, get married in a dress and be a girl later, so, like, it doesn't matter if you're being a tomboy at age 8.
Well, and then sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like, it goes into the whole, like, you know, oh, like, my son wants to wear dresses. Like, does that mean he's trans? Maybe. And also maybe not.
Maybe not.
Like, there's plenty of little boys who like girly things, and then they grow up and are just cisgender men. And that doesn't also necessarily mean that they're, like, lying to themselves or hiding anything. That's also something that I think is kind of, like, dangerous in the way that we talk about, like, gender stuff with kids, is there's this idea of, like, and I've heard people kind of just make this assumption that, you know, oh, like, if there's any kind of, like, play with gender when kids are young, like, the only reason why they would go back into something more heteronormative is because it's been beaten into them, that they, like, must reject that. And it's like, I don't know, gender's a spectrum, guys. Like, you know, I don't know. Gender's a spectrum, guys, and it's okay. Some people are still just gonna be straight and cisgender, but what I think is maybe more important, again, like, deorienting labels from all of this is, like, I don't know, just not projecting onto people what they have to be based on how they like to dress or spend their time.
Right, and it's like, I think, yeah, it's like kids should be given the space to explore these things without an adult then applying a label to them, or, like, freaking the fuck out about, oh my god, my son wants to do ballet, that must mean he's gay.
Well, right.
And it's like I feel like people so often do that logic leap. Or, and I guess there's also the like other kind of side of that, which is like, oh, my son wants to do ballet, that must mean he's gay, yay, he's gay. And it's like, actually, the fact that your child wants to take a ballet class has nothing to do with their gender or sexuality. And, like, that I think is what the dangerous notion is taking these things that your kid prefers and then trying to apply in either a positive or a negative direction any sort of, like, gender or sexuality label to them, because ultimately they're 7 and figuring it out.
Well, right. Well, and I also want to be super clear. Like, I'm not saying that there aren't trans children. Like, there are trans children. What I am saying is that I've just been in experiences where, like, I have had people like ask me, like, do you think my kid is trans because he likes wearing dresses and he's 6, and like in a positive, like promotive way, trying to be like, you know, should I like, you know, see if like he wants to use a different name or different pronouns or something like that. And it's like, I understand the desire to want to be supportive of your child, and like also everyone is going to go on their own kind of like gender journey, and especially if you're like a parent or somebody who's supporting a child, you want to be a supportive presence, not necessarily somebody who's saying, let me tell you what your gender is, because I think in any direction that's going to be bad, because it's an internal thing that you have to decide for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important just like to introduce these concepts to kids in like as neutral of a way as you can.
Yes.
Of like this is what it means to be a trans person, not this is what it means to be a trans person, and I'm telling you that because I think you're a trans kid.
Right. Or that because being trans is bad and you don't want to be around people who are trans.
Right. And so it's like, I think it's just more about like, how do we present these concepts to kids in like in a supportive but neutral way, so that then they can have the tools and the language to then make their own decisions about themselves and how they would like to be and move through the world, instead of being like, hello, my son, I think you are gay, and here's how I feel about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the thing that's always so insulting, like, you know, like stories of people coming out to someone and like, well-intentioned, a parent is like, I know, I've always known. And it's like, okay, like, I feel like that's actually a really unnecessary and unhelpful thing to say in response to someone coming out to you.
Because I just think that, like, in both a positive and a negative direction, sometimes parents make it about themselves. Yeah. And that's, like, kind of the positive version of making it about yourself, of, like, I always knew and I always supported you. And it's like, why is this about you? And then there's the negative side, which is, I always knew and I was always scared this day was come. Or, oh my God, I'm so shocked and you're like, dishonoring me by being gay. And it's like, why is this about you and not about your child?
Yeah.
So and to be clear, Aubrey kind of already made this point, but like I know kids as young as like 7, 8 who identify as either non-binary or trans. I think that's awesome, and them having media like the great Gonzarella episode of Muppet Babies is so sick, because they can be like, oh my God, I too am a little boy who doesn't want to be a knight. I want to be a princess, and now I like am seeing myself reflected that way in media. Mm-hmm. But I also think for cis kids who have never questioned their identity, media like this is so important, because it can dismantle some of what is set up in this episode, where girls have to be princess and boys have to be knights, because a little cis boy can then have like the, fuck yeah, it would be cool to be a princess. I would rather be a princess. I'm still a little cis boy, but like, I want to be a princess.
Yeah. Or I'm just a prince who wears dresses. And it's like, yeah, you can just be a prince who wears dresses. You can be a princess who wears armor. It's all fucking fake, guys.
Yeah, it's all, and so it's
maybe like, that is maybe my gender is I'm a princess who wears armor. Actually,
hey, hell yeah.
Brothers, I think we found it.
We did it. You guys, we did it. Ladies and gentlemen, we got them. Well, I was going to say, because I was going to say, sometimes your gender is princess. Sometimes it's knight. Sometimes it's cowboy. Mine is cowboy. And it's like, I just think it was really good. In this episode, when Miss Piggy is referring to the great to Gonzarella, she uses they, them pronouns for Gonzarella. This is before, like, she knows it's Gonzo, when just, like, Gonzarella shows up at the ball. But, like, I do think that, like, a thing that is really valuable in that is it's just sort of presented as, like, we don't know who this person is. Yeah, I just think it's a good episode, because it's so ambiguous about what it's saying about Gonzo's identity, and is just sort of, like, disentangling the notion of gender from dress in a way that I think is a very useful thing to show to kids. And it's also very shocking, because Muppet Babies is made by Disney, and it's actually kind of surprising that Disney did that. But also, again, this is when we were still in woke 1 before it became illegal to be woke. But I feel like something that I really want to parse out about Muppets in Space, which is that Gonzo feels alone and isolated in Muppets from Space, and is like seeking community and identity. But I think importantly, that doesn't ever cross the line into him wanting to be different than how he is, or be more like normal. There's not a moment in Muppets from Space where he's like, I wish I was a frog. It's just more that he's like, I don't understand why I'm the only one of my kind and why I have to be so alone. And so it's not a desire to be not Gonzo. It's a desire to just have other Gonzos around. And I think that's really refreshing to me about kind of Gonzo's character in general, is Gonzo is never trying to like become normal. And one of the other questions I feel like Muppets from Space is really exploring is like, does Gonzo need a label? And that obviously connects into a lot of what me and Aubrey have been talking about as in regards to like queer gender identities. I'm someone who really struggles with applying a label to myself. Every single one feels a little bit wrong and makes me a little bit nauseous to say out loud. I fucking hate calling myself bisexual. And like, while it's
Why?
like not...
That feels like that's internalized biphobia.
Because it doesn't feel actually accurate to my experience of how I experience sexuality.
What do you think what do you think is your experience that bisexuality doesn't describe?
I think for me, bisexuality has always been a term that then has made me feel, and this is not a thing I would impose on anybody else, but it is a thing that makes me feel like it's supposed to be even. Like, I'm supposed to feel even about it.
That's not what bisexuality is, though, brother. That's the internalized biphobia coming into your veins.
But I don't think it's internalized biphobia, because I have no problem with being attracted to all genders, but I just don't...
But it's the misperception that bisexuality implies an evenness. This is why I take beef with the pansexual label, because the pansexual label is people making that exact argument of like, well, I don't see myself as bisexual because it's not 50-50, and I also recognize attraction to more than one gender or to more than two genders and blah, blah, blah. So I'm identifying as pansexual, when it's like the origins of the bisexual gender identity from the get-go was always about attraction to multiple gender identities. And like, I don't know, I'm just 10 toes down because I feel so like adamant about the history of like bisexuality, because it is something that is like has been so explicit. When you read the like origins of bisexual queer literature, is the idea that bisexuality is describing an attraction to multiple genders in a way that makes sense for bisexual people. Like, and I'm not trying to like check you or anything, but I just think that the argument...
Yeah, I'll be honest, this is like something I'm actively working through in therapy right now, so I don't think I'm going to be able to give you like a good answer to why I don't love using the word bisexual for myself. I've been using it, I mean, I came out when I was fucking 14, something like that, and I think more what I mean by that is that like, as I have disentangled myself from gender, it then feels really weird to describe my sexuality in gendered terms, especially because I feel like it comes with a lot of baggage to be like, I'm bisexual. And then when I talk about like my struggles in dating, it like makes people have very gendered conversations with me about the people that I'm dating, which is just not, it's just not really a thing that I'm interested in. And maybe it's the autism, it really could be, but just none of these like discrete labels ever really felt right to me. And like, I also think that I, you know, as a person who doesn't identify with being a man or a woman, can't really be straight, and I can't really be like a homosexual. So it sort of leaves me this option to be bisexual as the default option, which doesn't feel right, because then I still feel like I'm like describing my sexuality in gendered terms, which is a thing that I'm like actively trying to avoid. So and the older I get into my late 20s, it's become a more comforting and affirming thing to just use the queer label, because it makes me feel like I'm then able to live in this like kind of nice place of ambiguity and whatever, and not feel like I have the baggage of these terms being applied to me, which it's, you know, is its own bag of beans. But yeah, I don't have a good answer for the question, and yeah. I don't know. I always feel like that when I say shit like that, people think it means I like think that like the label is wrong or bad, but it's just like they've never felt like words that encapsulate how I feel.
Right. It's labels that don't gel, right? And like I mean, I feel the same way, where I feel like there is a lot of pressure. I think I feel it the most around gender, where it's like, oh, like you're this way, like, and it just like it fucks with me a little bit. And I'm, you know, I relate in terms of like the gender stuff, where it's just like, I don't know, it all feels kind of bad, and I kind of just want to like be me and do what feels right for me. And like that's also like okay. And some of this is like chronically onlineness of people like wanting to force you into a box, and then once you're in that box you have to be X, Y, and Z. And that's why it's just like, I don't know, capital Q queer, baby. Like we don't we don't fuck with that.
Yeah, I think that like I generally have been having an issue. I got into the part of like Instagram reels where like there's a lot of lesbians being like all bisexual women are like lesbophobic and all of this stuff, and it's like I think that like there's this weird thing for me in the queer community right now where we're, especially among queer women, where we're like all really mad at each other. And it's part of why like a lot of these labels like make me uncomfortable, because it's like we're like partitioning ourselves off into these discrete little boxes and these discrete little categories where then we're also really angry at each other. And I think a lot about like sort of like celebrities recently who had been like capital L lesbians and then dated a man, and everyone's like, fuck you, die. And it's just like this whole thing of like I just want everyone to be okay with the words that people want to use for themselves. And like, while words do have meanings and like, you know, and things like that, I also think that like we can be really weird about other people's experiences, and it's like okay to have the experience that you're having and not like have to have it be the same as somebody else. I don't know. I just like, I totally understand. I have friends who like the label is very important for them because it helps them to put the language to how they're feeling. And for me, I think it has always made me feel limited in what I'm allowed to feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, a lot of the language stuff, like when we're speaking in terms of like activism, I think that language becomes more important. But when we're just speaking like socially, I just feel like right now, because I've also noticed the thing you're describing, and I feel like right now when being queer in general is so attacked, when so many people, like so many like frankly like gay men are transphobic, there doesn't feel like there's like solidarity amongst queer people. So I think a lot of people are responding to that by being like, who is my actual community? Where is my actual solidarity? And it just causes this like becoming more and more insular. And it's like, how are like trans women and like cis gay men and like AMAB non-binary people not realizing that we're all actually part of the same community? And that's, I think, something that I find like incredibly hurtful. And you know, and it just, yeah, like I imagine it just adds even more pressure of like pick and choose, pick and choose, pick and choose. If you don't pick and choose, then that means that something is bad is happening, or that you're doing something wrong, or that you're like not doing the right thing or something. And I think that's why I just have like stepped back a lot from a lot of like queer spaces, because I just find it so like critical.
Yeah, and I think that's like a thing that like, I mean, I deal with a lot too with like, you know, technically in a lot of ways, I mean, like for, this is a weird thing about like being non-binary or whatever I am, got me in my gonzo prison of whatever, I technically, I guess if I was dating another non-binary person, that would constitute T for T, but like, I don't know that I necessarily feel like a trans person in the same way that people who have like, I don't know, like it's like I just don't know. And I feel like a large part of like my experience of like being queer has been, it's why I like that definition of like that it's like an ongoing process, it's an ongoing journey, it's an ongoing figuring out and growing and evolving and changing. And I feel like sometimes people like want you to have the answers, and like be like, I am this thing, I am this thing, I am this thing in this box. And it's like I don't know that I'm any of these things in any of these boxes.
Right. Well, that's where it's just like the queer discourse of it, right? Where like I've heard people say, you know, you must refer to non-binary people as trans because otherwise you're being transphobic. And for other people, like there are non-binary people who don't really feel that their gender experience encompasses being trans. And I think that like both options are valid. And I don't know, it always ends up being that same thing where I'm just like, I don't know, capital Q queer. Why are we making these labels? Why are we making these boxes? And it is because people want like a sense of safety, right? Like they want to feel like if I have an example of like what it is to be this thing, then that helps me align myself closer to that thing, and then I feel security and safety, rather than what I think is maybe better, which is just like listening to your own internal cues about what's right for you and doing your own fucking thing, even if the language isn't there. But I'm also somebody who like, and that's like socially, right? And then like I understand like politically and activisty, like we do need those words.
Yeah. Well, it's like that's why like, okay, like in a technical and an objective sense, if I just like remove my own like ushy gushy feely emotions about it / my like discomfort about it, like in an extremely technical sense, I am a trans person because I am not a cis person. And there are a binary option with those two things, and I am not one of them, so I am the other. However, I also, as someone who is so femme presenting, feels fine about being referred to as a woman, doesn't have a lot of like beef when someone like is like Mackenna's a girl, because I'm like, not really, but like sure, I guess. Like I am not walking through the world with the same experience as someone who like is a trans woman or a trans man, or even a non-binary person who is presenting as extremely like androgynous and more in that like kind of third gender way. And so I personally have a hard time wanting to then be like, I am a trans person, because I then feel like I am claiming a type of like threat almost to me, especially in this like transphobic era, that like that threat is not to me.
Yeah.
Frankly. And so like I feel weird about being like, I'm a trans person, when like literally no transphobe ever is gonna get mad at me about being in a women's bathroom. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah.
And I think similarly with the bisexuality thing, it's like, in a very technical sense, 100% like I am like a bisexual person. That is because of like what you said, like what the definition of bisexuality is. But I feel like for me, it has always made me feel this very specific way that I am supposed to feel about attraction, which is that like, I don't know, and it's like I know it's not meant to be a term that implies equality, and that there probably is some internalized biphobia going on there, but it's like it is just like the way that it has always made me feel, especially because right now I'm in a time in my life where I have mostly dated men. It has been really difficult. I have tried dating women. I've had a really hard time dating women, and right now I feel a lot of external pressure from people to like start dating women. Yeah. And I'm like, you guys, this is all actually really hard for me. And actually the thing is that dating is just really hard for me. And like the gender of it all kind of isn't the problem. And so I think that like then, and I think that's why that like identifying as bisexual person has always like been a little tricky, because when I've been like, oh, it's been really hard for me to date men, people have been like, well then just date women. And it's like, it's more complicated for me than that. And so yeah, I think I just have like really, and so I think I just have always had really complicated feelings about this. And so like you say, Aubrey, like it is way obvious, it is a lot easier for me to just like go with a queer label, because it just it takes in the same way that like just putting a they pronoun in my she they just made me exhale, sort of releasing myself from the bisexual label, from the non-binary label, from the trans label, from the all of it, just kind of makes me exhale, because then it doesn't feel like I am being pressured to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. I mean, I feel similar feelings with like gender stuff, where I feel sometimes a lot of pressure of like, you know, oh, but you hold these beliefs, you are like this, you talk the talk, but you don't want to be she they. And it's like, no, the idea of somebody referring to me as they actually makes me like want to like scream. And that isn't because I am like grossed out or disgusted by like being non-binary or being trans. I just like it doesn't feel right to me. And that doesn't mean that it's something that would never ever feel right to me in a million years, but it's like it doesn't feel right to me right now, and it feels even worse to me if somebody is trying to tell me that it's what I have to do.
Right. And I think that's just like, I don't know. That's the tricky thing about like.
Well, and like to your point with
think,
like bisexuality, right? It's like you don't like, I feel like it's a similar thing with you where it's like, so what if I say I'm bisexual, then it means I've got to go fucking eat pussy tomorrow? It's like, I don't want to eat pussy tomorrow. Like, just let me be. And it's like, like but it does. It like feels like there's this like pressure of like, okay, so like the moment I say that I'm this thing, it's like, okay, so if I say I'm fucking non-binary tomorrow, it's like, what, I've got to start wearing fucking Hawaiian shirts and get a fuck ass haircut? Like, I don't want to. Like, it's like my gender is just something that like is personal to me. And it's like, maybe if to everyone who fucking looks at me, if they're like, yeah, this is like a fucking queer non-binary person, like, I don't know, maybe I take a little bit more like pleasure in just calling myself a woman and being like, fuck it, maybe women are non-binary sometimes, and there's something and maybe that's my gender.
You know what that is true? It's that question I asked at the beginning of the episode, if you were a man, a Muppet, a very manly Muppet, or a Muppet of a man. You are, what did you say, what did you just refer
I said I was a
as?
Muppet of a man.
No. What did you just say? That like sometimes women
are non-binary.
And sometimes non-binary are women.
Yes.
And because I'm sometimes non-binary are women.
Yes.
And it's like, it sucks that like because of the historical transphobia and nomophobia and shit like that like our identities are inherently political, and so we're like, that's why I get so fucking mad at like capital S straight people who are like, where's the straight pride parade? And it's like, no one's trying to kill you for being straight.
It's called the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. You can watch it on Peacock.
No one's trying to kill you for being straight. No one is making you investigate what it means to be a straight person in the way that like in the queer community, because there's like a danger in all of our identities. Yeah.
Well, right, and that's like part of it, right? Is that it's like the whole thing of like queer discourse and like wanting to apply these labels to you. I really think that at the end of the day, it just goes back to like people wanting to feel safe and to feel like they have community. And unfortunately, it's like, as queer people, if we make really hard and fast boundaries of like, this is what my definition of this label is, it's like all you're doing is like you're further isolating yourself rather than just finding solidarity with other queer people. So I mean, I think that these are shared experiences that are valid. Like, I don't know, I've always really struggled to like have community with other queer people, because it's like, yeah, like I'm a woman and I've like predominantly dated men, I'm married to a man, like there are times where I do present in a very femme way, but like I feel my queerness deep in my bones in a way that is like, that's my fucking truth. And it really hurts to see people joke about bisexual women with their husbands at Pride, because it's like, yeah, like I'm also queer and I would also like Pride to be a space for me, and it really kind of fucking sucks that it's never a space that I have felt welcomed.
Well, I think that gets into the whole thing, like the thing I've been kind of talking about with like with Gonzo in Muppets from Space, when he's like trying to figure out who he is and like trying to find something that's like going to give him a sense of grounding and identity, and then like he finds all these little creatures that are exactly like him, but what's actually more important to him is like the community that he's already cultivated. And it's like, I think that like as queer people, we often just, outside of all the political pressure, like I think that the universal experience of being a queer person is at some point in your life you went, something is different about me than all of this messaging I was given as a child, than this book of rules that says boys have to be knights and girls have to be princesses, and I like now have to reckon with what this feeling is. Mm-hmm. And that can be a really isolating moment of like, I now have to reckon with the fact that like the dominant cultural messaging I've been getting about what it means to be a person, something about me is different from that. And that's a real discomfort. Sort of like the queer identity question that I really like kind of like took away from Muppets from Space is like, is the point of Gonzo that he finally discovers what he is in that movie? Or is it the point that it never really mattered what he was? because even though he can't have pictures with the other Fozzie Bears or the other Kermits on the wall, he like did have a family this whole time. He did have a community this whole time. He did have an identity this whole time that wasn't related to what he looked like, what he identified as, whatever. It was more related to who he is as a person and to the people around him. And I think that that's sort of the thing about queer identity that, like, I really see in kind of the Muppets writ large, but, like, with Gonzo specifically. And so it's why I think the answer to those questions is that, like, ultimately that movie is about both those things. That, like, yeah, like, he did finally discover what he is. And, like, there's so much peace in, like, having a label. There's so much peace in knowing what you are. But there's also, I think, peace in knowing that, like, even if that label changes, when I first came out, I used the term bisexual, and now I feel a little weird about it. And when I first came out as non-binary, I was using the word non-binary, and now I feel a little weird about that. And I could maybe one day be like, oh, fuck, maybe I know a lot of non-binary people who, like, came out as bisexual when they were young, and then were like, oh, I'm actually not bisexual, I'm non-binary. And, like, the bisexuality thing was, like, on the way to the being non-binary. And similarly, I know a lot of trans people who came out as gay because that was the language they had, and then now that they are transitioned, they realize that actually was never their sexual identity. And it's like, no matter what you are, hopefully the people around you still love you, and that's the point, and that the other things about you are maybe more interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe the things that are what makes that like, I don't know, maybe there are people in my life who, hearing me say that, like, identifying as bisexual makes me a little uncomfortable. If that makes them be like, I don't want to be your friend anymore, that's a bummer, because that means that all the other things about me were less important to them than that label.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, and I feel like that's kind of what I take away from Gonzo and the Muppets, that, like, whatever he is, it's the other things about him that make the Muppets love him, and they aren't interested in him changing those things. And finding out he's an alien and not a whatever doesn't make them love him any less or love him any different.
Yeah.
So I think understanding where he comes from gives Gonzo some peace that there are more people like him, but he ultimately chooses to stay with his chosen family, and things sort of continue on as they were. People still call him Gonzo. He still acts like Gonzo. And nothing fundamental changes about the way that Gonzo identifies or is identified by others. His biological identity matters, but it doesn't transform his worth, and what's actually more important is who he is to the Muppets and who he is as a whatever, as a Gonzo. And I think also in particular, in regards to the Muppet Babies episode, a lot of children's media says, oh, you're weird now and feel different now, but it'll get better one day. And it's sort of ambiguous what the getting better looks like. And I feel like IRL, the getting better, is often just finding community, which sometimes are other people like you, and sometimes it's not. Like, sometimes it's just finding other people who understand you as a person outside of, like, these identity markers. And what I really love about this Muppet Babies episode is it's just not what happens. Gonzo finds that his existing friends accept him for who he is when he just explains that, like, I would rather be a princess than be a knight. Is that okay? And they're like, hell yeah. Also, why did we ever have this, like, princess and knight binary anyway? That was stupid. And I think in general, throughout all this media, Gonzo just remains a bizarre little freaky guy. He never stops loving chickens. He never stops wanting to get shot out of cannons. He never stops doing dangerous nonsense. Well, he does become a plumbing magnet at one point, but that's fine. The narrative doesn't, like, cure him or say that when you find the people like you, you'll finally, like, make sense. Instead, the narrative says that we like you because of those other things that you are, and we accept you as who you are right now. And I think for a lot of kids who grow up feeling strange in any regards, whether that is sexuality-wise, gender-wise, neurodivergence-wise, that's just, like, a huge message. And so I think that Gonzo ultimately serves like a mascot for people who find they don't fit neatly into a certain category. He provides a model for accepting and treasuring what makes us different and unique, instead of striving to fit in and become more conventional. To anyone striving to integrate unconventional elements into a self-concept, Gonzo provides a more flexible model that may help resolve the cognitive dissonance you feel about yourself. And I think that the big thing that we learn from Muppets from Space is that, like, the thing that makes Gonzo special isn't that he's an alien, it's that he's Gonzo. Like, even the aliens think he's one of a kind. And I don't think that is why he is special to so many little gay people, is because he's a freaky little blue guy. Gonzo offers an alternative answer to a question a lot of people spend their lives asking. And that question is, what if I don't fit? Most stories are about changing the character until they fit somewhere, or until they finally find the community of other people who are like them. And Gonzo's answer is different. He doesn't become less strange. And while there's like a lofty journey to figure this out, it turns out that the people who love him were there all along and didn't need tightly defined answers about his identity in order to love them. And I think that's maybe why so many queer people, non-binary people, weird kids, and neurodivergent kids end up saying, oh, that's me, when they see the great Gonzo. Yeah, so I think ultimately to me this episode is just sort of about, like, I think any way that you identify is totally fine. And I think that the desire to seek out community of people like you is natural. But I think the thing that I have found in my adult life is actually what's more important is seeking out people who understand you, and not necessarily because they are the same as you, but because they just understand you. And even if there are things about you that they don't understand, they still love you because they love all of the parts of you, even the parts that they don't understand. I feel really lucky. I'm not gonna cry. I feel really lucky that I have just like a really diverse group of people in my life. I have friends across the whole of the sexuality spectrum. I have friends across the whole of the gender spectrum who use labels in every combination. And I don't feel like I am loved more or less by any of them because of how proximal we are to each other. And I think that's really special, and I feel very lucky to have cultivated that type of community in my life, because I don't think everyone gets that. And I think it's really hard to get that. But I think it is really euphoric to get it too.
Waka waka.
Have a question or a topic that you would like for us to discuss, send us an email at informedattraction@gmail.com.